Okay, this is just spews. So this is an explosive story I'm gonna be reading, and it's the Wacky EggSplosions. How could you even put the word eggs in the word explosions? So it's supposed to be called egg explosions, so that's a good joke. So let's begin reading this book. Ace dozed in the ground under the Bow City Central Park side. He was dreaming about an adventure full of chases and explosions, and he kept twitching and jerking in his sleep. Zor wanted to play and nudged Ace with his nose. Ace swatted him away and kept snoring, so Zora started licking his face until he said, "Ah! There's a giant lizard licking my face." "Oh, sorry, Zorro. I guess I was dreaming." Ace stood up and went looking for a stick. He found one and threw it for Zora to fetch. He and Zora were having a great time in the warm sunshine when the wristwatch started beeping and it's time to answer it. Zora wagged his tail expectantly. "Hi, Ace. Where are you right now?" asked Isha on his wristwatch screen. "At the park. Why?" Ace replied. "We'll be there in 6 minutes," said Isha. "Something's up." Exactly 6 minutes later, Xena pulled the Bow City Museum van to a quick stop in front of the park gate. The other Soleros were already in the van, with Zoro and Ace squeezed in as well as they filled up every seat. "Sorry, things are so tight, Ace," said Xena as she drove along the highway out of the city. "But Professor Bart is away at a conference about early inventions of electric gadgets, and so we all had to come in the van." "Where are we going anyway?" asked Ace. "To Franklin's farm," Rue answered. "Franklin called Xena this morning, and it sounds like he has a pretty big problem on the farm. He won't tell her what it was, though. Instead, he said he had to see it for ourselves." Xena drove along the lane, surrounded by green fields, and up to the farmhouse. Franklin was out chopping wood when they arrived, and when he saw the van pull up, he rushed out to meet them. "What's going on that's so strange?" asked Xena as she got out of the car. "Like I said, you better see for yourselves," answered Franklin in his chuckling way. "I doubt you believe me if I told you anyway." He led them into the dairy room and into the first stall. Its floor is lined with a bed of straw, and a cow was sitting on chewing her cud. "Up, Betsy!" Franklin called and waved his hand to scare her under her feet. When she stood up, the Zaleros saw that she had been sitting in something white, about the size of a football. It was an egg. "Holy cowbells! What's going on?" asked Xena in shock. "The cows have been laying eggs for about a day now," said Franklin in answer to her confusion. "I don't know why, and I don't know how, but here it is. They seem to lay them every hour, but you're right on time that help me complete the next batch." The Zaleros and Xena shook off their surprise and spread out, helping Franklin collect the gigantic eggs. The cows were upset to have their eggs taken away, but then stamped and snorted. The team collected 16 eggs from the cows and then followed Franklin onto the shed he was using for storage. He opened the door and they were shocked again. "Giggling gumballs," said Lottie. "There must be hundreds of eggs in here." 286 to be exact, answered Franklin with a chuckle. They helped Franklin stack the new eggs in the shed, while Franklin counted to make sure of the tally. 285, 280. Oops. He said as the last egg slipped out of his hand and rolled onto the floor. Luckily, it didn't break. Zor ran up to the egg and sniffed it wildly, rolling it around with his nose. "What is it, boy?" asked Ace, picking up the egg. He looked at it, smelled it, and tapped it on the surface, but nothing seemed unusual. It seemed like one big chicken's egg. Then Ace held it up to his ear and said, "Guys, listen to this." They passed it around, but no one else heard anything until Oscar pulled a stethoscope out of his backpack and they used it to listen to the egg. They all heard a slow tapping or ticking coming from inside. "Is that a baby cow or baby chicken?" asked Isha. "Or both," laughed Rue, "like a cow with wings and feathers." "We can find out with an x-ray," said Xena, "and I happen to have an x-ray machine in the van." "I think we should set up a lab to analyze the eggs. Oscar, can you help?" "Sure, Xena," Oscar answered happily. The others wanted to investigate the farm, while Franklin, Xena, and Oscar walked off to the farmer's workshop. Wow! Exclaimed Oscar when Franklin opened the door to the room full of equipment and spare parts. You sure have lots of tools. Well, farmers have to be pretty independent, chuckled Franklin. If something breaks and I need to use it right away, I can fix it myself. He cleared off table space while Oscar and Xena went off to the van to pick her equipment. The other Zoleros split up in two groups of the three. Lottie, Rue, and Isha headed off to look out in the field while Ace, Zoro, and Amali stayed in the barn looking for clues. Amali climbed out into the rafters to look at the loft. Ace wandered through the rows of shiny steel milking machines. And Zoro sniffed around all the stalls. Hey, look at this, called Ace from over at the back wall of the barn. Amali somersaulted down from the loft, and Zoro perked up and ran over. Ace was holding a strange piece of shiny metal. It was about the size of his thumb, and shaped like a big medicine capsule. What do you think it is? Asked Amali, hefting the heavy piece of metal. I've no idea, replied Ace, but it sure seems strange. Let's go ask Franklin. Meanwhile, Lottie, Rue, and Isha were out in the field, while the cows were walking around slowly, nipping on the green grass. It was a big area, so they spread out and walked into one end to the other. A cluster of cows were standing around something by the back fence, so the three Zoleros closed in to have a look. They squeezed in amongst the cows and saw them licking a strange blue lump. What is that? Asked Rue, but the others had no idea. Guys, look at this, exclaimed Isha, who had walked around the back with a big lump. When the other two came to look, they saw it was marked with the big letter S. Do you think that this has something to do with Sorcero? Asked Lottie excitedly. Maybe, answered Rue. Let's get a sample of this and show it to Franklin. Back in the workshop, Xena and Oscar had finished setting up the lab, and the others walked in together to see the place looking ready to use. Look what we found in the barn, exclaimed Molly, holding out the metal capsule. Do you know what this is? Sure do, Franklin answered. It's a cow magnet. Some of the cows eat all sorts of things, and sometimes they eat bits of metal like nuts and bolts. That gives them a stomach ache, so I get them to swallow this magnet. It collects all the bits together so they don't feel sick. Oh, replied Ace, looking a bit disappointed. What about this? Asked Isha, showing a sample of the blue lump. That's the cow's salt lick, chuckled Franklin. They need extra minerals in their diet so I can buy them salt. I thought the S stood for Sorcero, giggled Lottie. The Zoleros were a bit disappointed that they hadn't found any clues to the mystery of the cow eggs. Has anything else new happened here the past few days? Oscar asked Franklin. New? Asked Franklin. Nothing really. Well, we did get a free delivery from a new cattle feed company. The Zoleros looked at each other for a split second while they raced to the barn to find the feed bag. When they got there, they found a stack of empty sacks in the storage room. Almost all the bags were right, but one of the stack was different. It was blue with a yellow zigzag on it. This must be the one, declared Isha. Look, there's still a bit of feed left in the bottom, Rue reported, looking into the sack. They hurried the blue sack into the workshop to examine the feed. Xena was in the back room of the workshop taking an x-ray of one of the eggs while the Zoleros were prepared to look at the sample of the cow feed from a high-powered microscope. Oscar used a pair of plastic gloves to pull and sample the feed without touching it in his hands. Isha crushed up the sample and scooped a bit of it under a thin glass slide, which she put into the microscope. This looks like normal food, said Molly, looking at the eyepiece of the microscope. Wait a minute, there's something moving in it. Let's turn on the magnification so we can see even closer, suggested Ace. Molly turned the lenses of the microscope to the highest power it had. Wow, she exclaimed. Guys, look at this. The Zoleros all turned looking into the microscope, and they all saw little box-like shapes with many legs and claw-like arms moving around among the bits of food. They looked like little robot crabs. I don't believe it, said Rue, when he had his turn to look. They're nanobots, microscopic robots of the cow's food. I'm afraid that's not all Zoleros, said Xena, seriously, as she walked into the room carrying a thick lead apron that had protected her body from the x-rays. Come take a look at the inside of the egg. She carried a dark plastic sheet over to a light and turned it on. The sheet lit up and the Zoleros could see the outline of an egg, but the inside was not what anyone had expected. "Whoa, that egg is full of gears and wires," exclaimed Oscar. "It's like there's a machine inside." "What is it?" "Do you think the nanobots are building machines inside the cow's eggs?" asked Rue, full of excitement. "It seems that way to me," answered Xena. "What I don't understand is why would anyone want to build machines inside eggs and make cows lay them. It all seems so bizarre." The Zolaris were about to agree when kaboom! An enormous explosion shook the walls of the building and sent the Zolaris staggering. "My cows!" Franklin shouted as he ran outside. The Zolaris found their bearings and hurried out after him. When they got outside, they saw the barn with all the cows was safe. It was the shed full of eggs that had exploded. "I wonder what happened," said Ace, unless the machines in the eggs. "Where's Zorro?" "He's napping in the X-ray room," Xena answered as Ace dashed back in the workshop. "Zorro!" Zorro woke up to the sound of Ace calling his name, and he sensed that something was wrong. He jumped to his feet and ran to the door of the small room and found it closed. Zorro snatched at it with his paws, but he couldn't get the door open. Suddenly, Ace burst into the room followed by the rest of the Zolarums. Zorro ran up to Ace happily, but Ace dashed past him and snatched the egg that Xena had X-rayed off the counter. "Look out, everyone!" Ace shouted as he ran outside again, threw the egg as high and far as he could. It sailed up in the air in a clean arc towards the middle of the field. It hit the ground and immediately exploded into a huge fireball. Ace grabbed Zorro in a big hug and Zorro licked his face. "That was close," said Amali. "The eggs, they're bombs," explained Lottie in surprise. Franklin became humping and pumping up to them to hear the news. "Bombs!" He asked, no longer chuckling. "Why would anyone want to make egg bombs inside of my cows?" "I don't know, Franklin," Xena answered, "but there's gonna find a way to stop these nanobots." "Well, in the meantime, I'm gonna have to be very careful with those eggs," said Franklin. "My poor cows, they never hurt anyone. What kind of mean wacko would want to do this to them?" The Zolaris followed him to the barn to collect the new eggs and help calm the startled cows. They took the eggs out to the field and placed them in the crater by the last explosion. When they were ready, they threw one last egg into a pile of safe distance, blowing all the eggs up. "How are we going to stop the nanobots from continuing to lay more eggs?" asked Rue when they were back in the workshop. "What if we shrink and teleport inside the cows?" suggested Ace. "Ew, that sounds gross," Lottie said with a giggle. "Besides," added Isha, "those nanobots look really mean. If we weren't the same size as them, I think they'd be pretty dangerous." The Zolaris thought some more, but no one seemed to have any idea how to stop the nanobots. "We could call Professor Bard," suggested Amali, standing on one foot to help her think. "I bet he'll know what to do with the nanobots." "That's it," exclaimed Lou. "What's it?" asked Xena. "Professor Bard's at a conference about electricity," explained Rue. "We could use electricity to shut the nanobots off." "Great thinking, Rue," praised Xena. "And I have some equipment that might do just the trick." To test the idea, Xena pulled out a small battery and attached a short wire to each end. She went into the sample of the microscope and placed the wire on either side. A zapping sound and a small puff of smoke showed that the sample had been zapped. "Xena, it worked, look," called Isha, looking into the microscope. Xena had a look and saw that the nanobots were all lying on their backs. The only movement was the odd twitch of a leg here and there. They quickly got to work preparing wires, cables, and a big old tractor battery that Franklin let them borrow. It didn't take them long to connect anything together, and soon had a device that Isha called the bot zapper, which two long cables coming out of the battery casing that had a big switch on top. They tried to finish machine on the second leftover feed. Oscar and Amali connected the two cables and Xena hit the switch. A loud zapping sound came from the second Xena turned the machine off. They put a sample of the zap feed under the microscope and saw that it had worked. All the nanobots in the sample had stopped moving. "What about the cows?" asked Lottie with a touch of worry in her voice. "I mean, will it hurt them to get zapped?" "No, it won't hurt them," Xena answered. "I have the voltage controlled so it's not going to be too strong of shock of hurt. But I think it will surprise them. Okay, Xena, agreed the cows. I trust you. I just feel sorry for the cows that have been through that much. Well, let's go help them, said Ace, smiling. The Zolaris carried the zapper out from the workshop to the barn. They were still nervous about zapping the cows, but Xena reassured them that although the cows would definitely feel the shock, it would really hurt. It wouldn't really hurt and would feel like when you rub your feet on the carpet and then poke someone else. She was right, but the cows still responded differently. The first one they zapped was Betsy, and she jumped about half a meter into the air. The next couple of cows ran around in circles as they were zapped, and others rolled around like a cart. Eventually, all the cows had been treated with the bot zapper, and the Zolaris stroked them kindly and fed them handfuls of hay. I think they've been through enough for one day, chuckled Franklin, giving Betsy a sympathetic pat on the head. They waited for a couple of hours to see if the cows laid any future eggs, but there were no more. The bot zapper had worked and you saved my cows, exclaimed Franklin. I can't thank you enough, but I think I know how to start. From behind his back, he produced a tray with 8 bowls of strawberry sundaes on it. This is fresh from my dairy, so I think you'll like it, he said and offered them a tray. Thanks, Franklin. The Zolaris said all together. Then they giggled and tucked into a delicious snack. This is so good, exclaimed Lottie. Can I stay here with you? Franklin gave her a hearty chuckle and patted Zora on the head as he licked his dish clean. When they finished, the Zolaris helped Xena and Franklin take apart the lab and carried all the Xena's equipment back to the barn. That was some excellent ice cream, giggled Lottie, while the other Zolaris groaned at the joke. Glad you like it, chuckled Franklin. It's the least I could do to thank you for saving my whole farm from EggSploding. You know, I just remembered something about that free cattle feed, said Franklin, suddenly serious. I don't know if that means anything to you, but the delivered man said it was a new product from Weevil Enterprises. Dr. Weevil, they all guessed. Of course, said Isha. Who else will be weird enough to try to produce egg bumps and cows? Well, whatever his plan was, we stopped him before things got too serious, said Ace. But what if he comes back? Asked Isha worriedly. Somehow, it doesn't feel like Dr. Weevil is just going to give up. Xena noticed that Franklin was staring towards the barn, looking concerned, and asked, What is it, Franklin? Did we forget something? Franklin looked and said, I just saw something weird. Look at that. They all turned around and saw that he was pointing at the great big brown bale of hay near the barn. With all the excitement, I didn't notice it until just now, Franklin told them. A bale of hay? Asked Rue. That's not unusual for a farm, is it? Well, it is if it's in the wrong place, Franklin answered. I baled the hay around here, and I never leave bales close to the barn. It was so serious that they decided to come with him to investigate. Xena and the Zolaris followed Franklin over the big bale of hay. It was taller than he was and rolled up like a big jelly roll. After walking around the bale twice, the Zolaris thought it was just like a regular bale of hay. Sorry, guys, Franklin apologized. I was sure it wasn't there before. Maybe you just need a rest, Franklin, said Xena, patting him on the shoulder. I guess so, he answered. I'm a bit worried about the cows today. He chuckled heartily. Wait, look at this, exclaimed Isha, pointing to the flat end of the bale. It looks like there's a door hinge there. The other Zolaros crowded and take a look, and suddenly the door opened and a cloud of yellow gas puffed out at the Zolaros. They instantly felt dizzy and sleepy. The last thing they remembered was a set of strong hands pulling them inside a hay bale. The Zolaros woke up in a dark chamber. What happened? Asked Molly. Where are we? They heard clanging and other mechanical sounds. Then suddenly a high-pitched voice screamed, Not there, you nincompoops! Put them over by the cluster bombs! That's Dr. Weevil, exclaimed Ace. I remember we were gassed and then pulled in the hay bale. It must have been some sort of vehicle. We've been kidnapped. The sound outside has died down, so Molly jumped up into a bar window, the top of the chamber, and looked out. We're some sort of warehouse, she reported. I bet Dr. Weevil brought us back to his lair. So how are we going to get us out of here? Asked Lottie. This might work, said Oscar, lifting something out of his backpack. It was one of the explosive cow eggs. Oscar cracked open the egg while the others looked on in terror. Don't worry, guys, Oscar said, seeing their worried faces. I found this last egg, but I decided to disarm it before I picked it up. So, is it still a bomb? Asked Isha. Well, I think I could turn it back on, answered Oscar. He pulled out some tools and wire from his backpack, then tinkered with the parts inside the broken shell. After a few minutes, he had connected a long wire and switched the other parts, and the bomb was ticking again. Let's take cover, Ace said as Oscar placed the bomb by the door and ran the wires back. They clustered in the furthest corner from the door, and Lottie blew an extra large bow to protect them, just in case. Ready, guys? Asked Oscar. 3, 2, 1. The door blasted away, and Lottie's gun bubble popped, but the Zolaires were fine, except for ringing in their ears from the loud noise. Slowly, they crept out of the dark chamber and peeked out to make sure there was no one about. Look, way up there, whispered Isha, pointing upwards. The others saw stalactites and realized that they were in a big cave. The rock walls above them were dark but sparkling with the light, and many spotlights shining down from the ceiling. I don't hear anything, said Ace. I think no one else is around. Come on, let's find our way out of here. The Zolaires snuck as quietly as they could down a large corridor between towering racks of machinery and parts. These are bomb parts, whispered Rue. Quiet, guys, warned Ace. There's someone here. The Zolaires ducked behind a stack of huge gears just in time. 2 seconds later, a group of workmen in yellow overalls walked by carrying a big pile of metal pipes. Dr. Weevil's henchmen, whispered to Molly. If we're quiet, they won't find us, so we can wait for them to go somewhere else. There was a clanging noise behind the Zolaires as they whipped around. Zora's wagging tail knocked a metal sprocket off of a rack and onto the floor. The workmen raced over and pulled a stack of gears out of the way to reveal the hiding Zolaires. Run! Cried Lottie, and the Zolaires ran as fast as they could between the racks of machine parts. There was a blast, and something whizzed through the air towards them. Suddenly, they were surrounded by a black band, which quickly tightened, trapping them. It squeezed them hard until they could barely breathe. Bring them here, shouted Dr. Weevil, standing in the loading bay as the workmen dragged the Zolaires toward him. Thought you could ruin my plan and escape too, didn't you? Dr. Weevil asked them. Well, I bet you didn't expect the elasticator. We could still get away, Weevil, challenged Ace. Zorro, I wouldn't bother by asking the dog to grow, laughed Dr. Weevil. If the mutt grows, the elasticator will squeeze you even tighter. Dr. Weevil saw that the Zolaires trapped, and he started to cackle. Then he frowned and broke into a bit of hiccups. The 2 workmen stared at their boss, and they started hiccuping too. Dr. Weevil suddenly held up a small, white egg in his hand. Dr. Weevil stared at the egg in amazement, and hiccuped again until another egg popped out of his mouth into his hand. The 2 henchmen also began hiccuping up the little eggs. Ha! This is a surprise, said Dr. Weevil, grinning. It seems that we've been infected by the nanobots too. Oh well, now I can make as many bombs as I want. Suddenly he stopped grinning and began hiccuping up eggs uncontrollably. Within a minute, 28 eggs had popped out. Help! Please! Dr. Weevil pleaded. All 3 of the men were kneeling on the floor, hiccuping and looking miserable. We'll help if you let us go, called a Molly. Never, answered Dr. Weevil, and continued resting on the floor while the Zolaires had all waited. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore and he gave in. Dr. Weevil crawled over and pressed a button on the elasticator. It snapped open and rolled itself up tight, freeing the Zolaires. Oscar pulled 2 wires and a battery of his backpack and connected them. Ready, Dr. Weevil? Oscar asked, and then he nodded, still hiccuping. Oscar quickly touched the 2 wires to Dr. Weevil's tongue, and he jolted and shook the zap of electricity. Oscar zapped the other two, and they all sat on the floor panting, but they looked very relieved. I hope you'll never try anything like this again, Weevil, Isha said, but even if you do, we'll be there to stop you. Starting today, I won't do anything mean to anyone ever again, whimpered Dr. Weevil. I promise. The Zolaris felt satisfied that Dr. Weevil had learned his lesson. He looked totally defeated. They gave each other high fives and hugs and got into a circle, put their medallions together, and teleported back home. Unfortunately, the Zolaros hadn't noticed that Dr. Weevil had his fingers crossed behind his back. Q's mouth is close up.